Hello, hello, hello. I'm One Proper Varian. This is not Crusader Kings 3, although kind of it is. This is the PDXCON Revisited video. Get a drink, sit down, have a good time. I'm going to show you some pictures, some good, some bad, some taken by me, some not taken by me. You can connect those as you will. Today, we're going to talk about everything that I had, going on when it comes to the experience itself around Stockholm, around PDXCON, and we're going to be talking about the CK3 news. We're going to be talking about some new and very insightful posts when it comes to the price changes, and we're going to be talking about the question of friends and foes. I saw a lot of discussion there when Friends and Foes was announced. I was in transit when Friends and Foes got its price point, and the discussion there took place. I was at PDXCon, so basically not using my phone and the internet. I caught up with the entire discussion. I made sure that I, actually had like the full set of information, because that is of course very, very important. I want to keep track of everything, and I hope that I did indeed succeed in that. So we're going to talk about just those two things today. My general PDXCon experience, so take this as like a feedback thing, well, take it as something, I guess, a travel vlog, whatever, it's not really, whatever, okay, and take this as me talking about the new stuff for CK3 that has been announced, that is still a conversation, and so on, and then in a separate video, I will be talking about my impressions of Victoria 3. I played a whole bunch, I talked, I needled so many of the Victoria 3 developers. I had a great time doing that as well. I think that was really worthwhile. I learned so much. Big shout out to, I think, the two people that I talked the most with, which were Paul and Aaron. Really, really insightful conversations, and of course with Martin, with Mikhail, I had a pleasure to talk to every single one of the folks that work on the game. But in general, I guess I should say I had a pleasure to talk to anybody that was at PDXCon. Just exclusively lovely people. Was very, very nice. We're going to talk about the Victoria 3 stuff in a separate video, because I want to gather footage from the official dev stream that happened, I think, a week ago, right? I want to use that footage to visualize the things that I am talking about. I don't have my own footage. I was technically allowed to do it, but the computers themselves just weren't set up to allow for recording, so I would have had to do it with a phone, and yeah, that didn't feel right? So instead I'm going to use the stream, and we're going to discuss that, but that is a separate video, because again, there's a lot of thoughts that I have on Victoria 3. Right, so let's start with the actual PDXCon travel. I flew from Germany all the way to Stockholm. Legroom was terrible. Arrived in Stockholm, really, really fascinated. If you live in Sweden, man, what an advanced society. No cash. I pay largely with my phone here in Germany as well, but cash obviously still rules supreme, and it was really nice to just have this experience where in Stockholm, for example, you get into a bus, you get into a tram, you can just scan it, boom, you're in, that's it. In Germany, there's like a guy, or there's people that every now and again will randomly enter a bus or a tram or whatever and be like, please show me a ticket and an ID. That's crazy, right? In comparison to Stockholm. I hope we catch up soon. With that being said, Stockholm is a really beautiful city. I was actually very impressed. I hadn't really seen much of the Nordic architecture, right? Except for Denmark, I guess. But Sweden, or rather Stockholm, I only saw Stockholm, of course. Stockholm is a really pleasant city from what I saw, at least in the center. That's obviously where, as a tourist, you are, right? Really nice and really enjoyable. I met up with some content creators there as well, a bunch of, again, really good people, for example, Elzeboy HD, Chewy Shoot, and so on. And then I went to the Vasa Museum. The Vasa, if you don't know about it, is the former flagship of Gustav Vasa. Gustav Adolf Vasa? I'm not sure, but it was his flagship, and it lasted for 1,300 meters. Then, because the cannon rows normally was just one row, right? But in this ship, they had a lower row as well. That lower row was open because they had fired salute shots, and all of a sudden, water came into the ship, and it was gone. That is good for history, because it means that Gustav, the old charlatan, lost his ship. But second of all, it's good because it was, of course, very easy to recover, and with that to put into the museum. I had a good time in the museum. It's really neat to see that sort of history, just dug up again. I mean, I guess in that case, actually lifted out of the sea. But it was very nice to see. Although I will say, if I had the choice again, had I known about it, I wasn't aware of this. Alexander Altman, the game director of CK3, actually informed me of this. But had I known about Skansen, which is apparently this place where they bring old houses from all over Sweden into that particular location that is so close to the Vasa Museum, and then put historical reenactors in it to be like, "Oi, I'll tell you about the old days. Yeah, that's right. We ate just ramming back in the day." I would have loved to do that. It sounds like so much fun, but sadly I didn't have enough time to do it after already being at the Vasa, so that was out of the question. Now, the Vasa itself, again, very cool museum. In itself, can't really regret going there at all. I also met a bunch of lovely people. We basically organized a very short, impromptu trip to the Vasa Museum on that day, on Thursday. And yeah, just a bunch of other PDXCON attendants as well, or attendees, right? And it was really neat. Well, it was really cool to hang out with everybody and to have a conversation. Well, at the evening, or in the evening of that day, or so on Thursday, the convention was on Friday and Saturday. On Thursday, I also had a dinner. I went up, talked to a bunch of really lovely content creators. For example, Kings and Generals was there, Ambiguous Amphibian, Monte, we had Spiffing Brid. I didn't spot Remy. Maybe I'm just blind, who knows. Really cool conversations, and it's just so unique, you know, when you work as a content creator in any capacity. I think you talk to people in your niche, in your genre, quite a lot, but there's a difference, of course, between talking and actually meeting, and I had a really lovely time meeting all of those folks. Really cool, really happy to spend time with all of them. And then the next day, of course, is PDXCON. And PDXCON basically for me was split between the 2 days. On Friday, I had a bunch of CK3 talks that I wanted to attend. On Saturday, I had a bunch of Victoria 3 talks that I wanted to attend, because those are the 2 games that I'm mostly interested in when it comes to the Paradox game catalog, right? On Friday, I had a great time attending the event workshop. That event workshop was basically just banter between Daniel Moore and Ewan Cowick Craft, which I probably mispronounced. Anyway, and that was great. That was really good. They essentially just showed off, okay, let's do an event. We have random input, and here's how you do this. In particular, and this is not relevant, I think, for most people, but I loved looking at the workspace that was created. You know, you have a program, and that is where you do your text work, and then you have a workspace so that you can quickly jump between files, so that you have stuff that you can just immediately work with. Very interesting to see, because as somebody that, you know, every now and again mods something into their own playthroughs, it's obviously from like a perspective of not really having a workspace. This was much more organized, was nice to see. In the end, they also answered a couple of questions there, especially when it comes to the question of, for example, how does the upcoming memory system change your approach to events? What does it mean? You know, how do you actually utilize this? Really interesting to see right there also. Now, the other event that I attended that day, and that was very important to me, was the actual CK3 dev panel. There were so many people there. Matthew, of course, Riyadh, basically people from all sort of categories of development, QA, the AI work done by Elizabeth, right? The is it AI engineer? I don't know what the official job title is in that context. The content designers, the game director, and so on. And that was a really good panel, because they were discussing how, you know, since CK3 is developed the way it is, they were talking about the question of, for example, how COVID, you know, worked for them, what it did, where it led them. And in particular, Riyadh had the very interesting story that Riyadh was onboarded as a part of the team during COVID, meaning he didn't meet anybody, right? Because you weren't in the offices at the time. It was work from home. And there was this funny story where they had this sort of thing where you log in, and it's almost like, I don't want to say the metaverse, okay? But it's kind of like the metaverse, I guess. You log in, and you have almost like the little office, and you can be at your seat, and people can approach you, and then actually the camera opens up. It's just like an easy social icebreaker, right? That's the point, and you have to do that in corporate environments, especially during COVID, because otherwise, how do you do team building in any meaningful way? And Riyadh basically was approached by somebody, and when people approach, the cameras, the webcams go on immediately, and the other person was like, hey, how are you? And who are you, right? And he just immediately shut his computer, because he shut it closed, you know, his laptop, because he was like, I can't do that, I can't talk to people, this is crazy. It's a wild time. I think it's been a wild time for everybody worldwide. It's been a wild time for workers in offices in particular, and for software and creative work, which of course Crusader Kings 3 is. And it was really interesting to get a glimpse into that right there, and into so many other things as well. In particular, of course, you know, how it's going with development in general. I was very impressed when it comes to just how they approach sort of project work, right? Where people will pitch some stuff. Elizabeth, for example, again, who does a lot of, well, who is in charge of the AI work now. Elizabeth, for example, also discussed the question of sometimes you pitch things, right? And you like it, the people you pitch it to are like, yeah, this definitely could go somewhere, but we have like all of this other stuff. Maybe later, maybe CK4, who the hell knows, right? And that's just interesting, of course, because it's a creative job, and it's nice. It's very, very nice to be reminded of the fact that doing creative work isn't easy, and that this is creative work. It's nice to be reminded of this because it will ultimately lead to situations where you do stuff that you're satisfied with, sometimes where you do stuff where you go like, man, really would like to do X, Y, Z, and so on. It was a very unique perspective, I think, for CK3 as a whole. I used the rest of the day, and I think this was the day... Was this the day of the orchestra? I can't recall here. Check this out. I can't actually click on it. My apologies. It's just Instagram won't let me because I don't have an account. But they had an orchestra playing Andreas Valdetov's greatest hits. Really nice, really cool stuff. I don't know whether that was on this day, but I got to talk to a whole bunch of the CK3 team. And as I mentioned, I asked them all the questions that they have already, I'm sure, discussed 15 times over internally. And I'm certain that I annoyed them quite a bit there, but I'm very thankful that they still had the patience to discuss all that stuff. You know, for example, the community feedback to the price increase, the question of friends and foes. At the, you know, friends and foes, when that was announced, again, I was in transit, I was then at the con. I hadn't caught up at that time with the conversation about friends and foes to begin with. But we talked about that in private. I really am very thankful for the time that they all spent, you know, conversing and talking about these things. Very, very interested in it. I had the pleasure to talk with Matthew as well, Veronica, who made a lot of content for the for Fate of Iberia, right? Yeah, just a bunch of really interesting stuff that I want to largely interweave into everything related. And let me just change the screen here again. Into everything related of how do I now view the current debate about CK3 content in general. How do I view the debate about the price increase? More on that in... Man, we have so much more on that. Look at this. Yeah. There've been many posts. I wish they had been done... Oh, right, you didn't see any of that, huh? There have been many posts. Look at this stuff, right? Explaining some things. Being open, being direct about things. And I'm very thankful for that. I want to talk about that because I think that is how you further conversation. I'm very thankful that they actually did that now. And the input from the CK3 team is something that gave me, I think, new angles or reinforced certain angles, which I want to bring up here now, of course, as we discuss this inside of ourselves, so within the community rather than a community to company conversation. Very thankful to everybody there. At the end of that, I gotta tell you, man, that was my highlight. And now listen, I got to even talk about to Martin and so on. That lovely conversation that we had there with Father Loris. Yeah, just a lovely conversation there in general. But my highlight, without a doubt, was that later in that evening of that PDXCon day, I sat down, I saw that there's the board game station, and they were playing the Europa Universalis, what's it called? Power, right? Board game. And I love that board game. I know that board game from the version the developers uploaded on the Tabletop Simulator workshop, and it's amazing. It's so much fun, but you never get to play that physically, right? Because it's just so difficult to find a crowd that has like 10 evenings to finish a game. And I was sitting down because I had recognized Monte Plays, who is a Solaris content creator, and I was like, okay, if I start heckling him, I can sort of cheese my way into this game and just like, hey, Monte, you should do X and Y. And the result was that we had, at least I think everybody had such an incredibly fun session of that. I really want to say thank you to everybody that was there, man. You playing that game and me being able to like sort of swoop in there and just observing and being able to heckle Monte was very, very cool. I loved seeing that. I love talking to the game's creator. Seriously, that game is very special. It's very cool. The game creator is an absolute lead. Really, really nice stuff. As you can see, yeah. Really, really enjoyable evening right there. Just drinking a couple of beers and letting it ring out with that board game. The next day, my plan was not to do any CK3 stuff anymore. My plan was to, instead, annoy Victoria 3 devs, listen to Victoria 3 talks, and of course play Victoria 3. And that is exactly what I did. I attended one talk that I really... I mean, man, it's actually crazy. Paul Dupre. Paul No Money Good, right? You know the stuff. Paul had a talk about the fundamental level of understanding that I think you should have when playing Victoria 3. And it's rough, because I met people, I talked to people, and one of the content creators that played Victoria 3, basically, when we were in conversation about it, was like, and I don't want to dive too deep into this again, because we're going to cover this in a separate video, but he was basically like, I don't know whether I like the game, because I have no idea what I'm doing. What's my goal? Where am I going with this? Why is this happening, and is it good or bad? And I think this is something where Victoria 3 is a game of incredible complexity. And the talk that Paul gave, he basically brought up a whole bunch of things that I was sort of intrinsically aware of I should do, but and you can see these slides here that are photographed, he gave context that makes it so that when I then returned after this talk to playing Victoria 3, when I smuggled myself into the play zone despite not having a reservation, it was much, much clearer to me what I should look at, what information I need. What information I need to maybe search 15 pages for, but that then makes it much easier to decide where I want to go. And what I want to do. And what I can do. What my potentials are. That talk, I'm not sure whether it will itself ever make it onto the internet. But I know that Paul said that the presentation sheets will be a bit reworked. And the notes, or well, the full text that Paul worked out to hold this talk, they should be online before release of the game. I urge you, if you see it, check it out. It's super interesting to understand the initial, basically the beginning situation of Victoria 3 whenever you start a new playthrough. Very, very interesting stuff, because it's so it's difficult to communicate, I think, in a UX sort of way. The game definitely tries, but Paul's talk was really like, damn, I all of a sudden was like, yeah, I gotta go back. I know exactly, like, which direction and what I'm gonna do now. Definitely cleared a bunch of stuff up for me. The Victoria 3 panel that followed afterwards, which was done similar to the CK3 panel, where there were a lot of people that had different qualifications, that were in different positions for the team, was a really interesting one as well. I'm not sure that one might go live. It was on the main stage. I know that they were filming there. I have no idea. But that was a really good talk as well. In the sense that the Q&A that they did there was really focused on, okay, we're in a position where we are making a game that has very unique expectations, I think, from the community. We're making a game that we ourselves, as the dev team, want to push into a very certain complexity and direction. And that differs in certain ways. You know, for example, and I talked about this with Martin. By the way, lovely meeting again. Yeah, it was really good. But we were talking about this, that the Victoria 3 dev diary cycle was much longer and completely different compared to CK3. Because CK3 cycle presented to you a product that was basically already done. The only thing that they reworked in between these steps that wasn't planned was the question of the vassal contracts, right? They changed that. Everything else was done and dusted. Yeah, sure, the devs very active in the community. They're very active, for example, in my communities as well. But Victoria 3 fundamentally was a much more discussion-based development cycle. I talked to Groogy later as well on in the night in the night of Saturday, and the development of parties, for example, was something that was not planned. That was completely, you know what, we hear the community feedback, let's just do it. And it was very interesting to hear about such a unique development cycle right there, because you don't have that a lot when it comes to Paradox games. It's just a bit different, or when you have it for games in general. I also got to talk to Paul Dupre and Aaron. Aaron is the UX power at this moment behind Victoria 3. Super interesting conversation. Was also lovely because there were two chaps. Sadly, the names escape me. Please forgive me whenever I do forget the names. But there were two chaps that, one of them at least, maybe both of them, were involved in the industry themselves. They work for, I believe, work for or work with Rockstar. And that was a really cool conversation when it comes to, okay, how do we approach this from QA? What is the angle of explaining the complexity? More on that in the separate video, though. I gotta tell you, I have a lot to say about about Victoria 3, right? Yeah, that was Saturday. Then on Saturday, went out drinking, was nice. Beer, ludicrously expensive. What are you doing in Stockholm? What's happening, huh? Ridiculous. That's insane. But lovely, nonetheless. I had a great time and learned a lot about English pantomime plays for some reason. And then the next day, of course, I went home, flew away, updated myself on all the conversation about friends and foes, and that is where we are now heading. I can only say that I had a great time talking to the individual devs. I also talked, of course, I almost forgot to mention that, I talked to the Stellaris devs by accident. We were eating pie chart pie, and I believe rightfully, the Stellaris team, I think, has to be, through and through, in the least negative way possible, the cockiest of the teams at all. Because, and Stellaris has really been nailing it, right? The Custodian initiative is insanely good. Their DLC, honestly, Overlord was the latest one that you know, came out, right? Just absolutely, it's a great damn DLC, right? And they know this, and it's so satisfying. It's so good to see them in a mindset. I had the pleasure of meeting Byron, the game director, yeah, and so on, right? And man, they were like, Freak, the Mr. Freak, right? The community manager was like, Q3 is going to be amazing for the Custodian initiative. Q4 you don't even know yet, but it's going to be amazing as well. And the Toxoid DLC is going to be the best species pack we've ever done. Rightfully cocky, if you ask me, right? They really have a good track record over the last years, and it makes me hopeful that the Custodian initiative is something that may make it into other games as well. But yeah, that was my run-in with the Stellaris team. I basically didn't at all talk with Hearts of Iron 4. We're not on a talking basis. I sadly missed Year 4. I would have loved to talk them as well, but their talks basically collided with when I was hunting down devs of the other games. But yeah, very cool conversations there. Can only say thank you to everybody involved. I met so many cool people. Again, if you were there, if you talked to me, thank you. It was an absolute pleasure. I only met incredibly pleasant people, and it was a blast. With that, I want to come to the end of this. I want to instead talk about Crusader Kings 3 a bit. I want to talk about the question of the price increases, maybe for the last time, and I want to talk about the question of the friends and foes so far, sort of perspective. And let me just rearrange my thing here. There we go. I need to rearrange my browser window before we switch into it. So now is the point where I would like to move on from talking about PDXCON in general and actually talk about the question of the price increase and what you can see right here, which is a massive, massive amount of input done by the product manager, which is basically more from the corporate side, right, where the price points are set, where the idea is to converse with the team, with the game director, to make plans and then bring that out into the open. And there are some really lengthy, some really interesting posts here made that were just made in the yesterday, as you can see, and I think they're very important. I think they have to be a part of this conversation, and I mostly want to highlight them because I think this is something that otherwise may be a bit lost, because it wasn't made initially, and it should have been made initially, in my opinion, right? But that's neither here nor there. I want to take a look at that, and I want to take a good look at friends and foes. I've seen the most differing opinions on that, of course, always overshadowed, I think, by the price increase. You could do whatever you wanted now, but obviously it would get flagged because the price increase still does not sit right with the community, and there has been a bit of a communication breakdown, is what I would call it, between the community and the corporate side, so the company. Now, I want to go through all this. I want to read through all that, and then we're going to take a look at friends and foes, and I'm going to give you my opinion, and I would like to kickstart a conversation similar to how we had it to the price increases there, right? The price increase video. There were a lot of really, not constructive necessarily, more like good comments. Regardless of whether I agree or disagree with them, I always enjoyed the ability of this community to discuss these sort of things. Let's jump into it right here. Wait a minute, did you guys increase the flavor pack price so you can charge more for the event pack? If the flavor packs had remained at $6.99, I imagine that you wouldn't have charged $4.99 for the event pack, as it's only $2 less. It probably would have gone down to $2.99 or something. Personally, I don't have a problem with the $4.99 for this. It's just an odd coincidence that right after the prices went up, a new cheaper type of DLC pops into existence. Don't take this as criticism of the event pack either. 100 events is nothing to scoff at, especially with the free stuff you've been working on at the same time. Yes, we did adjust the flavor pack to a price that is closer to their real value before releasing this one. That should not be a secret or something that people feel it is subterfuge. Now, did we just adjust flavor packs for this reason? Not at all. We wanted to make this adjustment for a long time, but we wanted to, A, make sure they were all out before doing this change. In fact, huge majority of players acquired those DLCs for less than $4 once you consider Royal Edition, Expansion Pass, regular sales, etc. Statistically speaking, if you paid more than $4 For either, or well, for either of the flavor packs, you paid more than the statistical average. This is what is being said here. Don't get that wrong here. People on average got those DLCs for $4. So whether you think $7.99 or $6.99 or what it is, or $12.99 is appropriate, the average gets it for $4. Okay, that is something to highlight. B, we wanted to make sure as many players as possible would benefit from the previous price point. That is why we are not changing the Royal Edition or Expansion Pass prices. Even with this change, they will stay that way. That is why we announced it ahead of time, so players can also take advantage of the current standalone. Flavor packs were undervalued. Now, you may disagree how much they should exactly be worth it, or even if they should be worth the same. That's fair. And of course, some people will think they're worth nothing, and everything in this game should be free, but I have no arguments for them, unless saying that you can always play mods, and we will continue to support them and also add more free stuff in the game. But if you start to check out what you get with $7 in other titles, PDX or not, the difference is clear. Even for CK2, I'm not sure it is fair to compare DLCs done back in 2013, 2014 that are now old enough to play Roblox with these DLCs. For some reason, people understand that many things get expensive over time due to inflation, production costs, salaries, etc., but video games should always stay the same. I'm not here to argue that something is cheap or not, is it worth the money or not. This is a personal call. Are you evaluating buying friends and foes instead of buying food, paying a rent or something important? Please don't. But do you enjoy this game and spend enough time with it to make it a good investment versus another drink or something else that you will play for 30 minutes and stay there with your library in your library forever? Then yes, think about it. This post, and it does not matter to me at all when we talk about this, whether you disagree or agree, whether you think that this isn't the real value, whether you think that, you know, for example, I don't know, you can't compare the DLC between CK2, whether you think the prices should never rise, I do not care what your opinion is in this context, where, with what I mean is, it doesn't matter in regards to this post being a good post either way. This is the communication, the transparency that I was missing. I think that much of the community was missing, that we were missing when we were looking at these things. I think this post should have been made much, much earlier, but that's neither here nor there. You can't really change the past. I tried, trust me. But this post is now here, and I very much appreciated that the decision-making process, that the reasoning behind it, that the point of view was much more closely explained by the product manager here. Let's keep this post in mind as we move through the other posts made also just yesterday. I appreciate your long and detailed answer and don't disagree with most of the things you said. However, do you really think that Northern Lords content-wise is of the same quality and quantity as Fates of Iberia? For Iberia, even $9.99 would be pushing it a bit, but Northern Lords, no. We know they have different perceived values. So what this means, just to clarify this, I mean it's very clear, I think, in a marketing point of view. Different perceived values means that the community genuinely and generally believes that they do not have the same value. Okay? This doesn't mean you are wrong about this. Obviously, they believe that they have, obviously they believe their own value proposition, but they acknowledge and realize that the community perceives them to have a different value, and that is a fact, in the sense that they don't deny that and say, no, the community is wrong. It is being said, we know that the community sees it this way, and that is the take the community has. We had a big debate about it. In the end, we decided that moving forward, we aim to achieve the same experience with future flavor packs closer to Fate of Iberia, and we definitely wanted to avoid confusion when you start to have 23 different price points looking at you, older titles. We decided that doing the move was fine, because as I mostly wrote above, A, the huge majority of players already own these DLCs and paid a very cheap price for both of them, average is less than $4, even if you argue that it is the price you would like for Northern Lords, that means you paid less than Fate of Iberia should be, so again, all in all, things equalized. B, we are announcing in advance, so players that are here right now still have the same chance as others of acquiring it cheaper. And finally, C, the Royal Edition and Expansion Pass prices will not change. If you buy them, you will get the same price as the huge majority above. I will tell you outright, I cannot justify disagreeing with this block of text. I cannot do it from my own personal opinion. I do not like it when prices go up. Who would like that? I do think that I share the point of view that the community has, that Fate of Iberia and Northern Lords has a different value. This is how I perceive their values as well. But when it comes to raising prices, the value perception in general will always be something very personal. And this explains the value perception of the company. You don't need to agree with this, I think, to see why the company sees it the way it does. A, in particular, is very, very interesting as a statistical point, where if you paid more than $4, you basically paid more than the average CK3 player, right? Pricing is the same as Iberia at $12.99, even at a 25% discount. I feel ripped off with Northern Lords, no matter how good the OSD is, and it really is. So I simply have to ask, do you have plans to up the content in the future so that it may actually be closer to its real value, as you put it? This is a really good question. They acknowledge the community views these as a different value. Now the question is, will you react to this? Unlike what people think, business and or suits, where I put myself, for example, very fair, product managers are basically the liaisons. They play a big role when it comes to setting the more corporate side of things for game development. So yeah, indeed fair, he puts himself into the business category. Do not dictate what is developed. It is a conversation between all of us, and there are other factors besides money. Is it cool? Is that what the team wants to make? How hard is it to make right now, etc. I would prefer to save discussion about future content, and we're doing next to the studio and the game director, so they're doing it internally, as I don't feel comfortable talking about it. This is a very important point for me. The CK3 development team, the CK3 community team, are one of the most engaged teams in the entire goddamn genre. I see them all over the damn communities. I see them very active. In recent months, official communication has been very difficult, to say the least. That is how I feel about it. This is a step up. This is a big step up as far as official communication is concerned in my eyes. But the team itself and the community people are so active in the communities that we already have much more information on what is occurring compared to most other areas of game development, be it Paradox, be it not Paradox. They very much need internal peace to talk about something, okay? Video games are a creative process, and I personally very firmly believe that when the decision has been made, you need to communicate things in a valid and good way to the community. And that is something that I have been missing. But I acknowledge that it is fair to say, I cannot tell you this right now, because this is a process where the team works through everything, then the team pitches it. Just for the record, for example, Holy Fury, right? Everybody loved that DLC. I love that DLC. It's a great CK2 DLC. But Holy Fury was an insane DLC, because it was pitched to the product manager with a year of development time. And especially for CK2, that's insane. That's lunacy. That's complete madness. And yet it happened. Because this is a conversation internally. It's just that we probably shouldn't participate in that conversation and heckle it actively. Just my take. I hope that when it comes to this, that it's apparent why I take the position that the team deserves some moment to communicate just between themselves. That they then deserve the time to communicate with, of course, the business side of things. And then we should, without a doubt, get transparent overviews. But fundamentally, I completely get this. I know, for example, that I would not want to be on the community team in these last few weeks and months. They are there basically to, of course, deal with the community, to interact with them, to try and, see the perspective of the community, to evaluate it. But oh my god. When this sort of stuff happens, and in my opinion, it happened with bad communication, but when this sort of stuff happens, people can become absolute fucking monsters. Pardon my language, but it can't be phrased in any other way. The abuse that comes by having open communication about certain things, and again, the community team is very, very open. They can't make radical decisions out of community discussions, okay? But they're very open. And I would ask for just a modicum of humanity when it comes to this. I think especially the second part here rings true. I want better communication, but giving insight into things that aren't fully planned, that aren't settled yet, should not be done. I said this in the price increase video itself. I want a very good roadmap. I want a roadmap of for example, what do you buy in this expansion or in this expansion pass? But you need to only give that roadmap when you are in a situation of knowing what the hell is actually going on internally. This is a creative branch, and people need time, discussion, and conversation to be creative. That was something that also came very much across when it came to the panel, the CK3 panel. That this is fundamentally a creative process that doesn't have a blueprint except some institutionalized sort of guidance measures, right? Very important post in my opinion. Let me know what you think about this. Here's a shorter one. Friends and Foes will not be added to any future pass. Friends and Foes is an event pack. It is what it is. We're going to come to Friends and Foes in a second. We do have plans for a new expansion pass or new expansion passes in the future. Not 100% sure yet, so not a promise. And yes, we would have a good discount there, similar to what we have with the Royal Edition and our current expansion pass. Prices may change a bit depending on its content. We may not have exactly an expansion and 2 flavor packs, but it will be a good investment of your money. These are the posts that I wanted to see. Wanted to show you here. Keep all of them in mind. This is official communication. I'm glad that this communication, whether you agree or disagree with the move, even looking forward now, I'm glad that this communication has been made. I want to highlight it. It's very important to me. Let's move to Friends and Foes and a conversation where I'm very confused by the community reaction, okay? Friends and Foes, what is it? What's going on here? I haven't covered it at all. I was gone. It's crazy, right? I'm me not talking about this right away while I'm on the plane. No, Friends and Foes is an announced event pack. It was announced on the live stream while I was in transit, and then a day later there was a post on the forums, I believe it was a day later anyway, on the price. The price point is $4.99. And that's the way it is. This is a pure event pack, so what is delivered here are flavor events. I'm baffled. I'll just say it. By the communication around this. And I think by the community communication around this. This time I'm gonna shit on the other side, okay? Hear me out here. I didn't know anything about this DLC when I was at PDXCON. I talked to the devs, and there was a very interesting sentiment. I'm not gonna out anybody here. I think these conversations are private, but there's a very interesting, like the exact content is private, but there's a very interesting sentiment and statement that was made when I asked about the question of how do you feel about the increase, how do you feel about the event pack and the community reaction to it. And that sentiment fundamentally was, if we get flack, if we get negative community treatment for releasing content that is entirely optional, and that allows us to continue releasing the bulk of the mechanics for free, then we will take that flag. We would rather accept that than start up a different model that would allow for a different type of monetization, but would lock people out of base mechanics, of mechanics that are much more important than the flavor. Friends and Foes is the goddamn epitome of this kind of DLC. It's the, out of all the damn DLC for CK3 right now, which is only 3 plus what pre-order stuff there was, right? But out of all the DLC for CK3, this is the least anti-consumer one that anybody could argue to be anti-consumer. I've seen the artists, and forgive me, it's very odd for me, the conversation that this has taken. I can see people being like $4.99 for events. I don't want to do that. I don't want to pay that, right? That's completely cool. That's completely fine. I think that's a very, very valid take. The community has asked for flavor for a long time. Flavor is something that can be done by modders. It's true. The main criticism that I've seen was modders like CyberXcan, who's amazing modder, could do this stuff, right? Yeah, I absolutely agree, sure. I have seen people say, I don't like the way they write these events. I dislike it. I'm not a big fan of it at all in any way whatsoever. Fair enough. If you don't like the way it's written, fair enough. But by not buying this DLC, you will then have no FOMO. When you don't buy Fate of Iberia, as much as Fate of Iberia is fair for putting the struggle mechanic into the damn base game, Fate of Iberia fundamentally changes the gameplay feeling in Iberia. It is the way it is. Northern Lords, not as much, but also fundamentally changes the feeling of playing in that area. You will have FOMO if you want to play in that area. And ultimately you can't avoid it. Not that you should always want to avoid creating FOMO in DLCs, but where I'm coming from here is, this DLC exists for people that want more flavor, that are interested in this. We're going to go over the actual content in a second as well. This DLC specifically is effectively designed around the very sentiment that I gave you from the devs, where it's like mechanics in a DLC that like should be base game only over my dead body, right? It is unbelievable to me that I've seen the conversations around this sort of go into that. Now they're trying to scam us. They just write a couple of events and sell them. It's like, yeah, sure, but it's just events. Not buying this one is completely fine. It's the least bad DLC type you fundamentally could make, because the stuff like memories, the AI changes, all that stuff, everything that went into that is free. Okay? It's baffling to me. It genuinely is baffling to me. I think a lot of this reaction to friends and foes, whether you like the writing style, whether you want the flavor from the devs, or whether you're gonna get mods, who cares? I think a lot of the feedback that was so very aggressive, and seriously, I've seen feedback basically decrying this as an insult, because it basically tries to scam you, I guess. A lot of that feedback, in my opinion, I feel the same, actually. I want a big expansion, right? I think a lot of the feedback comes out of the frustration that we do not have any sort of thing to look forward to, anything big, right? In my heart of hearts, I'm like, maybe Q4, now that there's so much space between this and Q4, maybe Q4 will see a big release, but I don't know. Nobody knows, and that creates uncertainty. And you go, why are you telling us about this small garbage, you know, to create a straw man here? I want the other thing. In my heart of hearts, I have to tell you that, yeah, to a degree, that definitely was like, oh man, it's like a tiny event pack. I wanted something big. Where's the big thing? I get that. But man, I want to be I want to go on the offensive as somebody that does not want a situation like CK2. Okay? The devs, when I got that sentiment about like we would rather keep everything free and get flag for here's a small event pack, sure, whatever. The event pack is so, I don't need to get it in a good way, that the flag it gets is baffling to me. The point ultimately that I'm making here is, I want something big as well. I think everybody does. I want something that really sort of refreshes CK3, right? But this event pack isn't the reason that something hasn't arrived. The community wanted more flavor. There was a poll a while ago where the community was asked to answer, hey, what kind of flavor would you like? And I assume that many people said, I would like to connect stronger to my personal relationships in the game. And this is the result. This is the result. You can miss out on it because memories, again, the underlying system that is so much more important because it allows you to track certain things over generations via dead characters, right? And then lets you recall that in events and so on and so forth, lets you connect to that. That thing is free. And that is a big, big step. Let's take a quick look at the actual event pack. You can see a bunch of events here. We're not going to work through any of these. I think tomorrow there's going to be a dev diary on the event pack. The thing that I noticed, and I think that outside of we actually wanted a big announcement, you just gave us a smaller, outside of that, I think another reason that people were mad about it is that the wording here was over 100 events are added. And then they chose the much more appropriate wording down here. And it's appropriate. I know it's appropriate because I talked to the devs behind this. Over 100 unique new experiences of medieval larger-than-life drama wait to be discovered in the new event pack. There are over 100 events, but an event in CK3 is a box that says, I went fishing today. Hello, I went fishing, it was windy. And then the decision down there, or multiple options, are like, wow, I was really cold, or I was not cold at all, I'm strong, right? And then you get some effect. And oftentimes there's multiple people involved. That's what one event is. Nick, who writes tomorrow's dev diary, went through the files and was like, for example, there's just like one thing that is counted as an event as per the announcement, right? So again, bad phrasing here, without a doubt. It's not the failure of the community that they read this as 100 events and were like, what the hell, 100 events? But Nick looked at it and was like, there are, for example, like things that are counted as one event in the announcement and are actually 30 events. They're conditional, you're not going to see all of them, they depend on how things go, right? But it's basically clusters, rather than, here's 100 events. I think, I'm looking forward to Friends and Foes. I think the memories is a really cool feature. I think it's very good. I think it belongs in the base game. I think it ought to be in the base game, and the fact that it is a great thing. I definitely want more flavor, and if this at the very least is a technique where you could get smaller updates that are entirely optional, because again, it's just flavor, between the big stretches, because clearly the scope of the immersion packs and the expansions takes more time and more work than originally anticipated. After 2 years, right, 3 DLC, you know, we've had this discussion before. And with that, I would like it, yeah, sure, if we every now and again just get more flavor in this sort, you can decide whether you want it, maybe a mechanic such as memories, you know, smaller stuff is added there as well. I am 100% in favor of this. I personally have not much to object to when it comes to friends and foes. I know that the conversation about it has been very odd, but yeah. The interesting thing, and why I was saying that I think much of the resentment here stems from the fact that we don't have any big announcement, is that I saw a thread on Reddit on Crusader Kings that was like... that was like, we need more DLC like this. And it was Holy Fury. Holy Fury, oh my god, I love that DLC. It's a great DLC. But it got me thinking. With the whole sentiment that the devs had on like, we don't want to have mechanics in the DLC, or at least as little as possible. With that whole sentiment, I asked myself, you know, when we do comparisons, right, between CK2 and CK3, in my opinion, rightfully, we do them between CK2 after its last patch, last DLC, with all DLCs active. And then we look at CK3 with all DLCs active, right? It's a comparison. I know many people are like, oh, it's only been 2 years. Fair enough, but I think it's fair to look at the old game and say which one actually realistically pulls me in more. I get that. But you know what I never see discussed? What is CK3 at the end of its lifespan like without any of the DLC? Okay? Because I think this is something that people don't understand anymore ever since the subscription came out. So where you subscribe and you get it for 1 month. It's $4.99. It's a huge steal. It's so many DLC. But I asked myself, what the hell is up with that? What does the CK2 without any DLCs feel like, right? Because I've never played with without any DLC. I have all of them. I own all of them over the years, right? And it's fascinating to me because this to me really revealed why my frustration that I felt when it's like, oh, it's just random events. Where's the big stuff, right? Where are the mechanics? My frustration there is much milder when I consider the theory behind keeping things active. This is CK2 without DLC at its last stage. I can't play any of these. Conclave, Celtic, Dynasty Shields, Hymns of Abraham. Can't play Republics, of course. Can't really go and play any of this because I don't have Holy Fury or the Old Guards. Can't play, you know, any of the Muslims. India, also a DLC. Yep, all of this, you see it right down here, all the DLC. If I go to the Iron Sentry, that was free, God bless. The Iron Sentry was a great damn DLC. But if you look at that, right, it's like everything's missing. And then you go, okay, well, how bad could it be? Let's just load in here. And you might remember, man, CK2 with all the... I don't like the societies, but it had the societies, it had the all sorts of things, artifacts. Let's take a look at this, right? Yeah, you got a treasury in the free version. But artifacts... I think there's like 5 artifacts or something that are genuinely free if you have no DLC. Great Works, Bloodlines. Let me actually check if Great Works. I can't remember. Yeah, Great Works was free, right? Bloodlines, not a thing you can get. This shield, all of that, the COAs completely screwed up. They were succession types, like the Eldership succession, that are locked behind Holy Fury. The law's completely different. The council is barely at all involved doing anything. The minor titles, I mean, that's a garbage mechanic. I mean, retinue's not a thing. Half of this, there's so much missing here. There's so much not going on there. When we look at the religion, no coronations. That's behind Holy Fury. Nothing here, you know, there's no Fourth Crusade. There's nothing going on there. There's no College of Cardinals. None of that stuff is happening in your base game. Amazing that this window even goddamn exists, right? I think it's used for secret faiths in CK2 if you don't have any DLC. It's empty. There's nothing there. There's no sickness. There's absolutely just nothing happening. Because, what wasn't buying... Oh my god, am I... You know what, I need to test it actually. I think a court physician is locked behind the damn DLC. I'm not saying this You know, if people go like the comparison between CK2 with all DLC and CK3 with all DLC, if they say it's unfair, I know at least where they come from. I disagree, but I know where they're coming from. I hope you understand why I think it's fair to compare CK2 at the end of its lifetime without DLC compared to CK3 right now without DLC. If you buy CK3 right now, the method, the approach that the team has taken to have stuff for free, that is mechanical, that is underlying, I hope that you see where I'm coming from here. Why I'm honestly, I was humbled in a sense, because I was like, yeah, I'm frustrated, I want a big DLC. And then they were like, you know what, here's the thing, over my dead body. You know, it's not optimal, yeah, it's rough, it can be rough anyway, but like realistically speaking, it's much more important that this stuff doesn't happen again. Look at this, look at this nonsense. Tribal, my god. I mean, it's much like CK3 right now, but it's a different world if you compare it to what CK2 is meant to feel like, right? My point here is, Holy Fury, to finish crapping all over it, is a great DLC, but it gated everything. It gated goddamn everything. There's a lot here, but it's stuff like added army movement lock system. My point, fundamentally, is, when we look back at the old times of ye old Holy Fury, please don't forget that if you didn't own Holy Fury, if you didn't buy all of these beautiful DLC here, your CK2 base version at the end of the lifetime is worse than CK3 as is. And that is a design decision. That is a conscious decision where you sometimes might take flack, which is why I do not at all understand people going like Friends and Foes' Betrayal. It's a literal free mechanic. If you don't like the flavor, if you don't care for the flavor, do not get it. This is a DLC designed that you do not want to miss out. This is as community friendly as it can be. Whether you like this pack, whether you want to pay $4.99, it doesn't matter, because this pack is trivial. And the content that is mechanical is free. You heard it here first. I just shat all over Holy Fury. I hope you understand where I'm coming from there. That was my takeaway. I think the opinion here is very much mine. It's a very strong opinion as well, as it always is. But I just, you know, you get certain sentiments when you talk, or you feel certain sentiments when you talk to the people, and obviously you annoy them by dragging this conversation out into the open instead of having a pleasant chat with them. But what was communicated with the dev understanding to me was, honestly, it opened, I think, my perspective up a bit, where that whole, like, Holy Fury is if Holy Fury came out today for CK3 for $20, which was Holy Fury's price, by the way, I would crap all over that, and I know most of the community would, because it's so gating all of the mechanics. It's so, it's not a good model. This right here is the epitome of you don't have to pay money to enjoy the game, because we add the actual mechanic for free. I talked for a long time. I hope that you're gonna stick around for the next video, Victoria 3. Let me know what you think about PDXCON, what you think about my impressions, and what you think about the new statements for the price increase and Friends and Foes. I'll leave it right here. I'll see you later. Alligator.